words for this morning come from Ariel Aronson Eves, a UU minister and farmer in New Hampshire, who I have had the pleasure of getting to know a little bit this fall. This past spring, before I made her acquaintance, Ariel facilitated a 5-session small group discussion series on liberation on the land. Ariel writes that over the time together, the group talked about farming and foraging as different methods of community resourcing of foods, land and labor as sites of power, and seeds and soil as collective creations, and that their group found their way to dreaming together on what healing and regeneration look like with regard to our collective relationships to the land. During 3 of the sessions, Ariel took notes of words, phrases, and ideas that were shared by the group, and then took a few minutes after the sessions to compose a poem inspired by the conversation. She says that these poems are the fruit of their time together, and their authorship is collectively shared by that group. And so now I invite this group gathered here this morning to join in a spirit of meditation, reflection, or prayer as we deepen into our service with one of these poems. O mighty nurturer, source of life and food, continually giving forth, however can I show my appreciation? How may I celebrate you, acknowledge you, thank you? I long for spiritual connection to you, one possible only through reciprocity, through a dance of co-creation, of power sharing, of responsiveness. I seek to learn the steps, to know them in my body, that each day I feel connection to you, to myself, to the past and future, to the collective human mermation. Let us heal together. Let us know and affirm and honor each other's worth. May this labor of love bring forth connection, beauty, and harmony. Our chalice lighting words this morning come from Paul Sprecher. We light this chalice for the web of life which sustains us, for the sacred circle of life in which we have our being, for the earth, the sky, above and below, and for our Mother Earth, and for the mystery. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce to you my friends and speakers for today, Luke and Linda Black Elk. Luke and Linda are food sovereignty activists and teachers of traditional plant uses, gardening, food preservation, and foraging. They spend their time collecting and preparing traditional foods and medicines for Indigenous peoples and communities in North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, and beyond. Luke is one of the founding board members of the Tatanka Wakbala Model Sustainable Community, which is a Native nonprofit on Cheyenne River Nation, focusing on traditional building design, permaculture, food sovereignty, and a return to Lakota spirituality as a guide for everyday life. Linda is a food sovereignty coordinator at United Tribes Technical College, where she teaches ethnobotany and traditional skills. Together, Luke and Linda sit on the board of Makoche Ikikchupi, a Native nonprofit, which is a reparative justice project on Dakota lands in Minnesota.
You sleep?
Luke and Linda make sure their 3 sons stay involved in all of this important work so they may learn about the importance of feeding themselves and their communities with food and medicine that nourishes and heals mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Great to have you here this morning.
Awesome. We're so honored to be here. Cool. Us?
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Linda Black Elk.
I'm Luke Black Elk. Thank you, Mary, for that great introduction. It's so good to be here.
Yep, we're really happy to be here with you guys. It's a beautiful day. Even though it's raining outside, we need that rain. Gosh, she read our bio. I don't think that there's too much more to say about that, but Luke and I really, we thought really hard about what we wanted to share with you all today. And, you know, Mary asked us to be here with you guys quite a while ago, and we thought about it so long we didn't get information to her until pretty late, but you know, with everything going on in the world, we firmly believe that all of this stress, all of the anxiety, all of the trauma, all the mourning, it doesn't just affect us spiritually, but it affects us physically as well. And very often it's resulting in a lot of illnesses. I mean, you know, we have COVID to deal with, of course, this continuing pandemic that's actually getting worse now, even worse than it was in 2020, even though no one's talking about that. But you know, I really believe that our immune systems and even our hearts and our minds are being so impacted that it's resulting in a lot of new and you know, exacerbating pre-existing mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical illnesses. And so we wanted to talk to you guys about one of our favorite ways to keep ourselves and our families and our communities healthy, something that we make for people, but also that we, you know, we try to give as many ingredients and food boxes out to our community as possible. And we always, when we make food kits for our community, we focus on, okay, what could people use to make a medicine soup? Okay, so that's what we call it. We call it medicine soup. It's just soup. But there's a lot of really important medicines that go into the soups that we make. And we think that it's really important to think of that very consciously, to be consciously aware of the items that you're putting into your foods that also serve as medicine. So we're going to share our screens. Oh, and I wanted to say that at any point, if you have questions, please absolutely feel free to ask questions as we go along here. Don't hesitate. And, you know, like you can put them in the chat and we'll try to monitor the chat. You don't have to wait till the end to ask questions, because sometimes if you do that, it kind of loses its momentum. So, or, you know, and you just end up not asking. So if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt us as we go along. Okay. Thumbs up, Mary. Can you see the screen? Okay. Cool. Okay. So, yeah, we wanted to talk about medicine soup, and the basic foundation of medicine soup is that we're talking about 3 layers of medicine, 3 possibilities. And so we talk about the broth, and we'll be posting a couple of recipes here too. So if you wanted to take like screenshots, or if you wanted to take your phone and like, you know, take a picture of the recipes, you can do that. Or we are super happy to send this PowerPoint to Mary, and she can of course send it to you. So, but yeah, so we think of medicine soup as 3 layers. And the first layer is Luke's specialty. He makes an amazing broth, and I'll let him talk about that.
When we talk about medicine soup, we're talking about getting all the possible medicine out of your food that you can, right? We've kind of, as a society, moved away from doing this. Maybe not in every household, but we have found, you know, talking to people and doing research on this, that a lot of people, you know, we've gotten into throwing in the little balls of bouillon cube to get bone flavor and beef flavor or chicken flavor or whatever you want, or vegetable flavor, however you want to make your broth. But we like to start with bone broth because there's a lot of medicine inside the bones of animals. You know, you get that marrow fat. There's a lot of you get some calcium that actually comes right out of the bone. Plus, you're adding herbs to your bone broth and other hearty vegetables, which are also adding their own medicine into that. And so you're starting out with this really nutrient-rich base for your soups, and that's a big part of it. I think that like in my family, when I was growing up, we kind of took this. We didn't have this step in our soup making. I think this is something that used to be there, but people kind of gotten away from it, especially, you know, a lot of people, you know, because of growing up poor or whatever reasons, you know, There's a lot of weak soups out there. And getting back to this, just getting bone broth into your soup. Bone broth by itself, we actually, last year, my mom broke her arm. And one of the suggestions from the doctor to help her regrow the bone was to drink bone broth. And so we were actually helping her with that and getting her some really good bone broth because that helps you heal.
Yes. And I don't know why it's not on here, but one really important thing that's missing from here, I'll have to remake this slide when we're done. We always add a tablespoon of vinegar when we are boiling our bones. That's very important because the acid from the vinegar breaks the bones down, and you can actually, I don't know how many of you are chemists and are interested in sort of before and afters, but you can take a sample of bone broth before you add vinegar and then after, and the nutrient level just skyrockets after you add just a tablespoon of vinegar to help break things down. It really does help. So that's important. We just add like a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. You can't even taste it, especially with that much, but it does make quite a difference. Another note that we wanted to talk about was the salt and why we use Himalayan pink salt, and about how that is not a politically neutral decision. No food is politically neutral. That's just impossible. But with salt, it's actually kind of an important thing.
Right. So we use Himalayan pink salt because a lot of people suggest, now you look at a lot of articles, you want to use sea salt. We really like sea salt. We like the flavor that it brings to food. But we've also found a lot of microplastics are in sea salts. It's really hard to filter out the little bits of plastic that have been dropped in the ocean and been ground up by the wave action and things like that. And so we went to Himalayan pink salt, but there's also issues around that. You have to be really careful with where you get your salt from because there's issues with slavery and child labor with Himalayan pink salt. So we have done a lot of research. We found a few places where you can get ethically harvested Himalayan pink salt where they, the money goes right to the workers and all those things. So, you have to think about all the steps you take when you're making food, because a part of that medicine is a part of what you're putting into it, and that energy from other people can go into that, even back as far as where the salt is harvested. You don't want pain or suffering involved in your food at all.
Right. As much as possible. Yeah. And it's so true. So back in like 2018, when it was discovered that a lot of companies were using child slave labor to mine salt, they actually, various countries like Pakistan, for example, developed commissions and really strict oversight. And there are human rights people who go around and check salt mines and check up the labor. We like to get salt from people who are certified as being ethical, but also you can find like families that produce it as well. And there's even, I can't remember the name of the company off the top of my head, but there are people who produce salt here, even in the US, and it's like a family operation on the East Coast. I'll see if I can get a link for you, but there you don't have to worry about those ethics, and you don't have to worry about, it's not sea salt either. I can't remember exactly how it's produced, but it's kind of cool. I wanted to address a couple of the questions in the chat. So yes, deer, elk, pronghorn, any of those animals, and any fowl, like a chicken, pheasant, turkey, whatever, like I know that a lot of people, even if you don't celebrate Thanksgiving, you'll still be eating turkey because there's always a reason to eat turkey. It's delicious. Don't throw the carcass away. Do not, there's just no reason to do that. That is still so full of medicine. Just take that whole carcass with all those little bits of fat and meat on there and the skin and throw that into a pot with water and, you know, some other really good medicines like bay leaves and peppercorns, the onion, garlic, carrot, celery that we talk about, and make some really beautiful turkey bone broth. And you know, then you haven't wasted any of that. And you know, I think we in our society, we've forgotten about how medicinal things like carrots and celery are, right? Celery is a medicine. There are so many amazing medicinal properties in there, so many good vitamins and nutrients. But yeah, deer is wonderful. We love them, and you can basically get those bones for free. But yeah, butchers are a great place to go to, Susan, to get those. And you know, I mean, these days it's harder because everyone's making bone broth, so they're not quite as free as they used to be. But our niece, for example, is a rancher, and she gives us bags of cow bones for free, and it's not industrial cow production. So
that's a good point. Again, with your bones and with the meat or whatever you're using, it's best to use organic and get as local as possible. A part of the medicine that you're taking in when you're taking foods in is what that animal ate and how that animal was treated. You know, or even with vegetarians. One of the things that Linda and I always try to discuss with vegetarians is that, or vegans, is that even those plants have a spirit that you have to respect, you know. One of the other things that's great about bone broth is you can make a lot of bone broth, and you can either can it if you're into pressure canning, if you're scared of that, which Linda and I were for a long time, and we understand that. You can also freeze it, you know. It freezes really well, and then we even have friends who put it into ice cube trays. They'll freeze it in ice cube trays, and then they'll put those right into a big bag. And so when they want to take out bone broth, they'll just put a couple of cubes of bone broth into their pot, and you know, you can take as many as you want.
Yeah, or even then they'll have like a cube that they'll melt for their kids and heat it up, and it's like a really great sort of snack. You can even just have a cup of bone broth for breakfast, and it's wonderful and filling. And just to make sure that I answer your question straightforward, Liz, yes, you can use start from raw bones or cooked. It doesn't matter. By the time people cook things, like even the bone from their T-bone steak or whatever, if it's come from a good animal, you know, we end up throwing that away, and it's a lot of medicine in there that we're throwing away.
The important thing is just to cook it for a long time. So even if you're starting with raw bones, you're cooking it for, you know, 6 to 8 hours, if not longer. So it's getting fully cooked.
And yes, we do pressure cook now, and we pressure can. You can pressure cook your bone broth. It definitely cuts down on the time, but it still does take a long time. You really want it to reduce down quite a bit and condense.
It's kind of like barbecue in that you kind of want to do it low and slow for a long time.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to get all that out there, but we do use a pressure cooker as well. I also, so just to get into a little bit more detail with your bone broth, you can do different flavor profiles, and that will change the medicinal properties of your soup, of your broth. Okay, so if we're talking about bone broth that you want to use to make something like pho, which is like one of our most favorite things in the world, I can eat pho like almost every day. You can add like this sort of flavor profile, and yes, of course, you can mix things together, but you know, wow, I'm amazed sometimes. Like, do you guys know what Tamiflu is? That drug called Tamiflu. It comes like in a dropper, but it has a stick that you put up your nose if you've caught a virus. And so it's a powerful antiviral medication. And I don't know how many of you guys are old enough to remember the swine flu epidemic, when everyone was really concerned about swine flu going around. But back then, the president actually started to, you know, had organizations hoard Tamiflu just in case of a much larger pandemic. It didn't end up going that far at that time, but Tamiflu became kind of a prized commodity And what we found out is that the active ingredient in Tamiflu actually comes from this spice right here, star anise. This is star anise or star anise. Star anise is an amazing herb with a beautiful sort of anisette licorice flavor. And it is so beautifully medicinal, beautifully fragrant as well, has adds a wonderful flavor to savory and sweet dishes. But very super antiviral. And in fact, all of the spices on this page, like the cinnamon, the cloves, the bear root that's here, also known as OSHA, and the cardamom are all antiviral. They all boost the immune system, and support general health. Also particularly good for lungs. But like, for example, cinnamon. How many of us think about the fact that just a little bit of cinnamon and honey is wonderful medicine for diabetics? And I know, honey or maple syrup, you think, I don't want to give that to a diabetic, but just a little bit, so that they can actually consume the cinnamon or cinnamon in your bone broth, is wonderful for diabetes. It really helps to improve function of the pancreas. So if you've been told before that maybe you were borderline diabetic or that you have diminished pancreatic function, cinnamon is something that's really wonderful to add into your diet. One of the sort of, I suppose, outliers here is this beautiful OSHA or bear root, bear like the animal, that's in the top right-hand corner. That's a very important indigenous medicine that's used by a lot of Native people. And it, it's great lung support. Like we grind it up a lot, mix it with honey, and then use spoonfuls of it for things like asthma. We've been using it almost constantly throughout the COVID-19 pandemic for elders. But that is one that it's very hard to find it ethically sourced. That's probably true with a lot of these, right? It's hard to find ethically sourced cinnamon. So you want to make sure that, you're aware of where you're getting these things. And we're happy to provide some sources for you guys. But bear root is one in particular that's difficult to find ethically sourced. So if you're not harvesting it yourself or someone you know personally, make sure to ask and be aware of who is wildcrafting that and asking what protocols they're following to make sure they don't take too many. Another flavor profile, if you don't want to go the like sort of cinnamon, those fragrant spices like cinnamon and clove and star anise, of course, is that I think this is more the flavor profile we think of when we think of soups. And that is, these beautiful, these are actually California bay leaves, a native bay leaf, totally indigenous, grows all over California. Our friends sent us a beautiful box of those. They're so fragrant and amazing. And also it's fun to forage things, these spices, but things that are so easy to grow, so super easy to grow, even in North Dakota. Thyme, oregano, rosemary, the culinary sage. I think we forget that all of these herbs are beautiful medicine. We really don't think about that, right? When you throw a bay leaf into a pot of soup, do you really think, hey, I'm going to throw some antiviral power into my soup? You think about the flavor, but the fact is bay leaves are wonderful antiviral. They're actually these particular herbs are super anti-inflammatory as well. So if you want to make a soup for someone who has some arthritis, maybe they're having trouble, with their joints, are really inflamed and they're in a lot of pain, make a soup with a lot of these beautiful anti-inflammatories.
If you have gout, there are so many diseases, our ailments, are things like that we have, and it's just a lot of times. Well, I can't say just. In my opinion, it's the food that we eat. A lot, especially young people. We're so ready to just go and get a McDonald's burger when we're in a hurry. when this is really the food that we need, and that McDonald's burger has no power, it has no medicine in it, and it's actually harming us because it has so many preservatives and things like that.
Yeah, foods with a lot of those preservatives, high amounts of sodium. One of the most inflammatory ingredients on the planet is refined sugar, right? And Mary, you've probably heard me tell this story before, but I was in Australia years ago for working down there, and there is a big, a big issue because the government of Australia declared that anything that had so much sugar in it had to be put on a dessert menu at restaurants. So the Big Mac at McDonald's was put on the dessert menu. And at all the McDonald's down there, it was on there for a number of months while I was there. And, it ended up being that they had to change the recipe. But, when people order a Big Mac, they don't think, oh, there's, more sugar in here than in 2 king-size Snickers bars, right? But there's actually tons of refined sugar in a Big Mac. People don't think about that. And yet, they eat one and then they wonder why their arthritis is flaring up, or why their gout or fibromyalgia is becoming such a huge issue. All of those inflammatory issues are often attributed to the food that we're eating. And even depression and anxiety is often an inflammatory issue, inflammation of the brain tissue, particularly post-COVID. If you know anyone who is suffering from COVID, what they call long COVID, and has been suffering from that for a long time, it's often an inflammatory issue, inflammatory of, muscles and bone, tissues holding bones together, or inflammation even of brain tissues. And all of these, these medicine soups can really help. Something else that you can add to your broths that really ups the anti-inflammatory power are medicinal mushrooms. And now my love here is like an absolute mushroom hater. He does not like mushrooms at all. And for the first 5 years we were together, I would have different things. I love mushrooms. So I'd have different things with mushrooms. And I'd always say, come on, this tastes like meat. And he's just like,
Meat don't taste like that.
It does not taste like me. He hates the texture too.
Well, what we found is that if you take and you dry a lot of these mushrooms out, and we've started making it into a really fine powder, we add that to the soup broth. It adds a lot of nutrients. You're getting a lot of the medicinal qualities from the mushroom, and not a lot of the flavor, especially in soups, because it's when you're using bone broth and these other herbs in your soup, those flavors are coming forward, and it's a good blend.
Yes. And everyone talks about all these berries that have antioxidant power, right? So antioxidants destroy. Have you ever wondered why antioxidants are on every label? Like, woo, this is full of antioxidants. It's because antioxidants destroy free radicals. Free radicals are like these particles that cause cell mutation, which causes cancer. So basically, antioxidants help to prevent cancer, okay? And cell mutation in general. So they're super good for you. They even help to keep your brain tissues healthy, right? And they help to prevent cell death as well. So antioxidants really are a good thing. Well, we think of all these berries like blueberries and acai berries and all of that, they're all like, oh, and these are packed with antioxidants. None of them come even close to the antioxidant levels of medicinal mushrooms. Things like chaga, which down here in the bottom left, which grow on birch trees. And this is a stone bowl that our friend carved for us, and we're grinding some chaga mushroom in there to put in soups. That's what that picture is. These are reishi mushrooms, which I have found in North Dakota a couple of times, but love to grow more in like Montana and up in the Northwest, but also in the East. I found them in Minnesota as well. And these are turkey tail mushrooms, which are actually super common in North Dakota and wonderful, wonderful medicine. Super full of antioxidants, but also, again, these are very anti-inflammatory as well. And if you don't like mushrooms, like Luke was saying, that's okay. You know, get these mushrooms, powder them in your food processors or in with your mortar and pestle, and then add them to smoothies, add them to soup, add them to, you know,
Your coffee.
oatmeal, your coffee. Yeah. And if you know, if you don't want to get your mushrooms individually, there are really amazing mushroom blends out there. And they're even selling things. Have you guys seen advertisements for that stuff called mud water? It's a coffee substitute that tastes like coffee. I mean, it really doesn't taste any different, but it's actually mushroom powders. And you know, so if you're not someone who wants to do that yourself, you can actually buy those blends. Okay. So that's basically the first layer. Then when we're thinking about all the broth, right? And then I know. Gosh, okay, we'll hurry. How much time do we have? Sorry about that. Okay,
So
so
5 more minutes.
okay, so the second layer is the
5 more
stuff that I know. The second layer is the stuff you actually eat, right? That's the stuff that gives your soup bite, right? The stuff that's actually in your soup. And like I was saying earlier, we think of onions and garlic as culinary items, all of these alliums. We think of them as culinary products, but the truth is they are amazing medicine. My friend Ann Whitehat, who is a fantastic Sichangu herbalist, she, during COVID, she's been using just chopped up onion wrapped in cloth and placed on the chest as a poultice to get rid of lung congestion. And it works for sinus congestion as well. Beautiful medicine. Okay. And then these are wild ramps. I don't know how many of you guys have had ramps before, but I'm looking forward to ramp season in the spring. This is not our picture because we would never take the whole bulb or the roots because they're very sensitive to being over harvested. But yeah, delicious. So full of medicine, powerfully anti-inflammatory. We also love to add all kinds of greens to our soup, both wild and cultivated. And I wanted to say, so these are stinging nettles in the middle, higher in protein. If you're a vegan or a vegetarian, stinging nettles have more protein than almost any other green plant on earth. They're delicious and nutritious. I just always try to focus on the tender green leaves up toward the top of the plant. Rather than these older leaves, they get tougher and higher in silica. So I really prefer the more tender tops. If you're wondering why you might want to eat something that stings you, with any cooking, all of the stinging effect goes away.
Great to put in, especially if you're a vegetarian, great to put in like a squash soup with some fresh nettles and let the nettles kind of cook in there. Really good.
So delicious. Yeah. I mean, they really have a wonderful flavor too. And then over here on the right, does anyone know what this is? You guys familiar with milkweed? It's not just food for butterflies.
So it is a great food for butterflies.
Yes.
We've found actually that if you grow milkweed in your yard or you know a patch, it's good to cut back some of the plants so it kind of staggers the growth periods and the blooming periods of the flower, and that way the monarchs have food throughout the whole season.
And we do too,
Yep.
because you can eat the young spring buds that come up of the milkweed, and then you can eat the tops and the flower buds. That's what you see there are the flower buds and the young tender tops. And then you can also eat the seed pods, and they're delicious. And we've been doing everything from like putting them in soup to stuffing the seed pods like jalapeno poppers kind of. So really delicious. And then I wanted to talk about if you don't have access to fresh greens all year long, of course in North Dakota, that's very difficult. So we love to dry our greens. This is actually on the left side here. This is just dried kale and cabbage that was grown in our garden. And all we did was lay them out, or you can put them in a dehydrator and let them dry. And then we just have them in a jar. And anytime we make soup, it doesn't matter if we're making chili or if we're making pho, or if we're making, you know, buffalo stew or whatever, we put a handful of greens in there for that beautiful, healthy green power.
And one of the things that we want to talk to about people is that with times being what they are, that we're starting to see supply chain issues and things like that.
Yes.
So it's good to have a garden and be able to save your own things and really get yourself prepared.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we also love to add all kinds of legumes to our soups. And we really love bean blends as well, and legume blends. And they add so much protein power, and they're so filling. So beans, it doesn't matter what kind of soup you're making. It's always nice to, a lot of people these days are making Three Sisters soup, which are those three sisters of corn, beans, and squash, and they taste great together. And yeah, so you know, all of these beautiful beans. There are wild beans as well in the top right here. These are actually wild beans. Lakotas call them maca tomanicha, which means earth bean, or mouse beans, which are really fun to get.
And again, beans are super easy to grow. So if it's something that you want to do yourself, it's really easy to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then squashes, dried or fresh. We dry our summer squashes, like our zucchinis and our yellow squashes, as much as we dry our winter squashes. All squash can be dried and saved for the winter. You know, I know winter squash can sometimes be a bit of a misnomer because they do go bad, you know, and they probably go bad starting around January. You know, you can usually keep them that long, but then in North Dakota, we still have 3 more months of winter, and certainly, you know, quite a long time before our squashes are ready to eat. So dry your squashes. If you have some zucchini you're still trying to save, freezing them is okay, but it takes up a lot of space in your freezer. So we just dry them. We just hang them up to dry. We can come back and talk about food preservation sometime. But you know, drying them is wonderful. And there's, to me, the best soup broth in the world is when you put dried squash into it and you just kind of let it melt into the broth. Oh my gosh, the flavor of that is my favorite soup broth ever.
Butternut squash is like the best thing for that.
Yes, so good. Luke's mom, oh, just to say real quick, she is not a vegetable eater, but we put dried summer squash into all of her soups. She thinks it's bacon. Like, it just has this sort of strange leathery texture, and it soaks up the salt, and there's just something about it. She thinks it's bacon. So it's our way of getting her to eat her veggies. Quickly, you know, we love to put, like, it's not just about potatoes in soup, right? Potatoes are very high glycemic index. There are big time issues with diabetes and things like that, raising the blood sugar. So when you're making soup, try to think beyond potatoes, you know, to traditional items like wild rice and tipsila, the prairie turnips, to instead of putting sweet corn in your soup, look for those beautiful varieties of traditional native corn. And it's also a great way to support native indigenous producers as well, who are growing things like Bear Island flint corn and, you know, just beautiful varieties of like Mandan, bride corn, all of that. Amaranth is really fun to put into soups. And then last but not least, my personal favorite, like, you guys know when you eat pho, the Vietnamese soup pho, you know, you have those beautiful noodles and broth and everything, but then there's always those fresh toppings, and I go crazy over that stuff. And but Luke and I, we put toppings on all of our soups. And so, like, tell them, like, about our kids and how we set stuff out for them.
So one of the things that we like to do is like Linda was saying, put fresh food with every meal. A lot of fresh vegetables when we have the chance, right? Bean sprouts, and we will set out 5 or 6, 7 different little things that we're going to have on our soup. Linda and I usually use everything, but we'll tell our kids that they have to pick at least 2 of those things. You know, fresh green onion, fresh
Fresh chilies,
some
kind of sprouts,
cabbage,
radishes. Yeah. And we tell them, you have to choose at least 2 or 3 of these items. You know, it varies depending, like, even when we have chili, we'll put out sour cream and cheese for them, you know, but we always put out the veggies, the jalapeno, the avocado, all kinds of stuff.
Cilantro.
Yes, cilantro. And we tell them you have to choose at least 2 or 3 of these to put on your soup. And it's a great way to, you know, get them to enjoy those things and start eating them. So yeah. And I mean, you know, this actually, it was a couple years ago. This is Luke standing in my mom's perilla patch right behind us. That's perilla. It's a type of mint that they're actually using to fight COVID now.
Another thing that we like to put in is like pickled things,
Oh, yes.
like kimchi, sauerkraut, different kinds of pickles, pickled vegetables,
Fermented.
fermented.
Yeah, yeah, which is different than pickling.
Sorry, I say them as the same thing.
Yeah, but even pickles are good, like on soup, like adds a hint of acid. But like, you know, kimchi on top of a bowl of wild rice soup is delicious. It adds spice, it adds, you know, just a little bit of that fermented funkiness. If you don't like the spice, you can use sauerkraut instead, and it's just super good. And those fermented foods add tons of, are really good for our gut microbiome. So, you know, if you have an unhealthy gut, start thinking about adding some of those, you know, sneaking those fermented foods into your diet a little bit.
You can also add nuts, like we do roasted pumpkin seeds. There's a couple of soups that we put in, like walnuts into.
Yeah.
Just depends on what flavors you like, what the flavor of the soup is. Expanding your palate. You know, a lot of it is about expanding what you eat.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna stop my share here. So thank you guys so much for listening to us. Oh yeah, cool. Sorry. If there's any questions, we're happy to sort of stick around and answer them, but I know you guys have a schedule to follow too. So thank you guys so much for listening to us talk about medicine soup though.
Thank you so much. I'm getting messages like, we need to have them back. We should do a whole series. So there's clearly.
We're so happy to do that.
Yeah, such a great topic.
Thank you guys.
Yeah. We extinguish the chalice this morning, giving thanks for all that creates and sustains us. Ambetu washdewa el unhina jipi. Taku wa kanshkanshka, unchima ka, khatetopa, miniwichoni. Hena ie kiapi, na wokida tanka unke kiapi. Nitaku ye oyasa.